When my daughter's groom told me I didn't deserve thanks for paying for their entire wedding, something inside me went cold. I smiled, walked out of that hall, and by morning, they realized exactly who owed who. Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments from where you are watching this video. The morning started with a quiet sky and a checklist in my pocket. I walked the venue before anyone arrived, counting chairs without thinking. The ballroom smelled like new paint and chilled roses from the freezer. I paid for the roses and the paint and almost everything else. Staff wheeled carts past me, careful around polished floors I approved. Karen, the planner, flashed me a thumbs up and a worried smile. She kept saying we were on budget. I knew we were not. Still, I nodded, because the day belonged to Emily, not the bill. I checked exits, emergency lights, and the sprinkler valve in the kitchen. A father's job is to make space and keep the weather calm. Vendors lined up like a parade of invoices wearing black shirts. The lighting crew clipped harnesses and checked each truss with patience. I remembered roofing jobs, where one loose bolt meant a funeral. Money buys margin, and margin keeps people standing at midnight. I signed every contract under my company, Turner Build and Supply. The banker liked me because I paid on time and never begged. This wedding felt like a retirement speech without the microphone. Not a show of power, just a promise kept in plain daylight. Laura preferred big gestures, and this was the biggest I could manage. I checked the seating chart and pretended the numbers didn't sting. Emily arrived in a whirl of fabric and perfume, late but glowing. She hugged me quick, then turned toward her bridesmaids like a director. "You okay, Dad?" she asked, already halfway to another question. "I'm good," I said, because that was the only answer. Laura floated in next, hair perfect, eyes scanning for status. She kissed my cheek and reminded me to smile for photographers. We were long divorced, but we kept the peace for Emily. Laura liked grand entrances and clean narratives for friends to admire. She whispered that Ryan was nervous and trying to impress everyone. I said details mattered because details are the only part I trust. Ryan showed up with his friends, sharp suits and louder voices. He shook my hand like it was a competition I hadn't entered. "Big day, Mike," he said, using the nickname he chose himself. I told him to enjoy it and keep Emily at the center. He promised he would, then asked about the top shelf bar hours. I reminded him there were limits because bartenders read the room first. He laughed like limits were for other people and moved on. His father followed, praising the venue without asking who paid for it. Ryan's buddies bragged about sales, cars, and weekend bets like trophies. The band tuned up and the floor began to tremble softly. The ceremony ran on time, credit to Karen's tight schedule. Vows were clean, practiced, and emotional enough for the cameras. I stood when told, sat when told, and clapped with the crowd. Emily's eyes found me during the recessional, and I nodded back. I remembered teaching her to drive in a parking lot at dusk. She jerked the wheel until she learned to breathe between turns. She learned most things that way, with stubbornness and then grace. Marriage would test both, and I hoped for the better outcome. Candles warmed the room like little promises people mean to keep. I kept breathing and stayed out of the pictures on purpose. Cocktail hour swelled with small talk and careful congratulations. Ryan's friends held court by the bar, loud and easy with champagne. They treated him like a king who ruled by clever shortcuts. Emily floated between tables, thanking people, missing me by inches. Laura managed a cousin's seating complaint with a polished smile. I kept to the edges, the way foremen guide by simple presence. Karen checked in about gratuities and timing for the toasts. I authorized both and asked her to keep the microphone locked. She said the speeches would be short, smooth, and mostly harmless. Then I saw Ryan raise his glass and step toward the microphone. The room leaned forward, waiting for the story to begin. He tapped it twice, testing a bright sound that cut the air. Emily turned, surprised, and gave him a small nod to go ahead. People drifted toward their seats, carrying plates and unfinished jokes. I stood by a column, close enough to hear every word. The photographer crouched, ready to catch whatever face came next. Ryan grinned wide like a man who never considered a closed door. I felt the deck shift, the way houses creak before a storm. Karen met my eyes, her headset tilted like a question mark. I folded my hands and leveled my breathing out of old habit. The night was about to teach someone the price of borrowed pride. Ryan tapped the microphone twice, and the room leaned forward as if pulled by a string. His smile looked rehearsed, the grin of a man closing a quarter. "To my wife," he began, and the crowd answered with quick applause. Emily's face softened. She expected a simple thank you. He shifted slightly, shoulders squared, voice brighter than the chandelier glare. "Big night, Big love, big bills, he said, fishing for laughs. A few guests chuckled, not sure where to land. People keep saying I should thank everyone who helped. He paused long enough to feel powerful. His eyes moved toward me like a spotlight he thought he owned. A nervous buzz slipped over the tables, small and quick like bees. Ryan leaned closer to the mic and stretched out the moment. I've been told I should thank Emily's dad, he said evenly. He's a hard-working guy and he cares. I respect that. He let the word respect hang as if it weighed a lot. But we're not kids, and we're not a charity case. His glass lifted higher, and his chin followed. We're starting our life on our terms. He smiled wider and drove the nail. We don't owe you anything. The line hit clean and hard. No echo needed. I watched shoulders stiffen and eyes shift. Emily's mouth opened a little, then closed, then found a practiced curve for the photographer. Ryan, not like that, she whispered, but the mic stayed live. He laughed, soft and smug, and brushed her off with a grin. Relax, babe. It's a joke, he said, while the air cooled by 10 degrees. Real jokes don't need a target. They work without bruises. He pointed at the band and added, worth the price, though. The drummer stared at his snare and tapped his sticks without sound. Karen, the planner, pressed 2 fingers to her headset and nodded to a tech. Ryan saw the movement and slid a step away like a morning radio host dodging a producer. Some folks think money equals control, he said, widening his stance. But love is free, and we're free. He wrapped his wedding ring against the mic, chasing a cheap beat. No invoices attached, he added, letting his buddies by the bar laugh loud enough for 3 tables. I could have walked up and taken the mic from his hand. Instead, I studied the pitch of his pride and measured its hollow center. Pride sounds like wood when a beam is overstressed. Emily stepped forward and took the microphone with steady fingers. Thank you all for being here, she said, voice even and sure. We're grateful for everyone who helped today. She looked at me across the flowers, and I gave a small nod. Ryan leaned toward her shoulder and said, especially grateful to each other. He tried to kiss her cheek. She stiffened a fraction. God, the room felt like church when a phone won't stop ringing. Laura clapped too fast, clinging to a hopeful beat. Karen cut the mic and sent the band a cue to play. A soft standard filled the gaps and bought the room some air. People sat, then stood, then pretended nothing had happened. I stepped through the service door and let the hallway's cool draft touch my face. The corridor smelled like lemon cleaner and fryer heat. The kitchen crew moved in clean lines, busy and quiet, doing work I respected. Karen found me there with apology already forming behind her eyes. Don't, I said. It's his mouth. She nodded once and asked if we should reorder the timeline. Keep it tight, I said. No more open mics. He found me 10 minutes later with a swagger he'd borrowed. Hey, Mike, he said, like we shared campfire history. You know I was kidding, right? He didn't wait for my answer. It's a vibe with my friends. We rag on each other. Keeps it real. I kept my hands in my pockets and watched his eyes, not his smile. You spoke clearly, I said. I heard you. He tried a new lane and pointed a thumb at my chest. You're a contractor. You get margins, bids, poker faces. You know the game. No receipts, I said, and let it sit there. His grin blinked out and came back thinner. Look, man, don't take it personal, he added, light and careless. You paid for a beautiful day, and I appreciate it. He used appreciate like a coupon at a register. Emily and I are building our own future, he said. We're not signing up for control or strings. Then don't tug strings in public, I said. Especially not on your wife. He glanced toward the ballroom and adjusted his cuff as if it were a plan. I stepped back into the room and kept still near the bar. Emily reached me first, breath shallow from moving table to table. Dad, he didn't mean it, she said, working hard to seal a fast crack. I'll talk to him. I kept my voice level, the way I do on job sites. Enjoy your night, I said. We'll talk later. She touched my arm, then pulled back like she felt a charge. Laura arrived, smile polished, words tight. Don't make a scene, she whispered. I don't make scenes, I said. I finish projects. Dinner arrived like blueprints laid corner to corner. Guests laughed louder than needed and stabbed jokes into their plates. Ryan worked the room like a weekend timeshare pitch. He hugged men he barely knew and fist-bumped grandmothers. Emily did the real work, softening edges with small, true words. I let every later speech pass without adding a line. Sometimes the best repair leaves the crack visible for a while. By coffee, I knew nothing more would be said tonight. I would not debate gratitude over cake and noise. The DJ announced the father-daughter dance, and the floor opened like a calm bay. Emily placed her hand in mine, and we moved in slow circles. I'm sorry, she whispered, eyes not leaving the middle distance. Not tonight, I said, steady and warm. We kept our rhythm like we had in the kitchen years ago. I'm proud of you, I said. That doesn't change. She breathed out and rested near my shoulder without quite leaning. Pride isn't a loan anyone can call in, I added. The song ended, and the room clapped like nothing broke. The band slid into a safe classic, and guests drifted back. I stood by the service door and felt the room cool again. Laughter tried to patch the crack that Ryan's words had opened. It worked for most people because people prefer patched stories. I prefer clean lines and work that doesn't hide weak studs. I walked the edge of the ballroom like a sight walk at dusk. The florals were heavy and precise, built on rented pedestals I approved. The bar ran on my account with a ceiling and a buffer. The ceiling mattered, and the buffer mattered more on nights like this. Karen caught me near the kitchen pass, headset tilted, eyes sharp. You doing okay? She asked, voice low enough to be kind. I'm fine, I said, keeping my tone level and simple. We good with contracts and ownership tonight? Her look changed, from sympathy to logistics in one beat. Everything is under Turner Build and Supply per your instructions, she said. Venue, lighting, band, rentals, even the shuttle buses. I nodded once and watched the hallway clock move a small step. Good, I said. Let's keep it tight and inside schedule. I found Laura near the dessert table, calibrating a smile for cousins. She touched my sleeve with careful fingers and checked my eyes. Please don't turn this into something larger, she whispered, breath steady. Emily needs calm tonight, nothing else. She has calm, I said, keeping my voice even and patient. I'm not starting anything in that room. Laura exhaled like a person spared a rumor. Thank you, she said, and tried to step away with soft grace. I'll head out a little early, I added, eyeing the doors. Text me if Emily needs anything real. Emily intercepted me by the coat check, bouquet scent, trailing. You're leaving? She asked, trying to keep it light and quick. I'll be up early, I said, steady like a plumb line. I want you to enjoy tonight without me nearby. She searched my face for storm signals and found none offered. I'm sorry about what he said, she whispered, jaw set tight. We'll talk when the noise is gone, I said, honest and calm. She squeezed my hand once and let it go with care. I love you, she added, and I nodded because words were enough. The parking lot gave me clean air and a clear ceiling. The night smelled like asphalt and wet leaves caught in drains. I sat in my truck and let silence arrive without apology. Humiliation is hot at first, but it cools to something hard. I don't drink when I'm angry because it ruins the math. Instead, I think in lists and draw lines no one sees. A wedding is a project with dependencies and switches hidden. I held those switches because I paid for access and responsibility. Responsibility means you can shut a system down when it fails. I called Daniel and got his voicemail on the second ring. Need you tomorrow morning, I said, voice even and clear. Simple question about event contracts and personal property. I kept it short because he knows how I think. I called Karen next and kept my tone business flat and steady. Are we clear to end vendor services at any time? I asked. Within the contract windows and safety rules, yes, she answered. Give me notice and I'll coordinate lockout and exit. Copy, I said, and thanked her for running a clean board. She said, you paid me to keep control, and you have it. I drove to my office because the lights always answer. The lobby smelled like cedar and machine oil, which always helped. My foreman, Luis, was finishing a checklist for a Monday pour. Boss, you good? He asked, reading my shoulders, not my face. I'm good, I said. Need a favor tomorrow at first light. He nodded like a man who understands simple commands and timelines. Pickup and storage? He asked, guessing the shape without details. Maybe, I said. I'll confirm after I speak with counsel. He tapped his notebook and said he would bring the small crew. I thanked him and kept moving because details love momentum. In my office, I didn't shuffle papers or count receipts tonight. I opened one drawer and looked at the signed agreement list. Venue under corporate account, with termination rights for safety or misconduct. Rentals under my name with repossession allowed for non-compliant use. Band and lighting with show cause clauses tied to client instructions. Shuttle buses controlled by my dispatch approval through a single code. Hotel block through my card with release rights by written notice. The bar under a capped authorization, adjustable at my discretion. None of this meant drama, only switches labeled in plain English. I drove past the hotel and watched the shuttle unload smiling faces. People love weddings because they believe in stories that end clean. Clean endings require constraints nobody wants to admire. I walked into the lobby and greeted the night manager by name. Everything okay with the Turner block? I asked, polite and steady. All set, Mr. Turner, he said, checking a familiar screen. Authorization active, incident controls noted per your email. Appreciate it, I said, then added one small instruction. No incident, no changes. If there's trouble, call me before police. He wrote it down because written notes survive loud moments. On the drive home, the highway ran like fresh concrete under stars. I kept my speed legal and my thoughts inside guardrails I trust. Ryan's sentence replayed, not to sting, but to measure shape. We don't owe you anything as a declaration, not a thought. Declarations carry costs when they're stapled to someone else's ledger. I don't control adults. I control assets I'm responsible for using. Tomorrow would not be a tantrum. Tantrums waste leverage and burn edges. Tomorrow would be a reset to the limits they chose publicly. Limits are not punishments. Limits are the price of free choices. At home, the house felt like a workbench after a long day. I washed my hands because habit marks the end of a shift. I looked at photos of Emily taped on the garage fridge door, learning to ride a bike, winning a science fair, driving at dusk. Every image reminded me that debts and love are different objects. Love is not a tab, and gratitude is not a contract, but respect is a beam, and beams hold the whole roof. When a beam gets cut, the roof demands new framing. That is not revenge. That is structural correction with clean math. I set my alarm for dawn and wrote 3 lines in a notebook. Protect staff, control assets, keep Emily safe from public mess. I would not embarrass her because that is not repair. Repair hides the work so the room can be used again. The Yaork's room here was a life they wanted without strings or thanks. I understood the request and would honor it with precision. They could have free. I would have safe and proper boundaries. Morning would bring the quiet sound of switches clicking back to off. The alarm cut through the dark like a clean saw through pine. I lay still and listened to the quiet house breathe around me. Dawn sits honest. It shows what you built and what you faked. I brewed coffee and let the first swallow set my pace. Anger wanted showy words. Discipline asked for plain ones instead. I thought about the years that led to last night's sentence. I kept a small life so Emily could try a bigger one. That was the arrangement I made with myself long ago. Deals like that hold until someone starts treating them like free candy. When Emily was 10, Laura wanted a bigger house by a lake. I ran numbers and said we could, but the margin might scream. Don't make her grow up small, Laura said, pointing toward their future. I heard the charge and said I'd take extra weekend jobs. You want this or not? She asked, smiling like victory already. I took it because I could carry heavier things than my pride. Emily got a room with blue walls and a wide window. I got a new truck that smelled like debt and wet lumber. We all called it a family win and kept moving forward. Middle school brought braces, travel soccer, and a science camp in Colorado. It'll shape her, Laura said, passing me a brochure and a date. I said yes again and found another subcontract at a mall. Nights felt like the inside of a paint shaker, steady and loud. Emily thanked me with handwritten notes that smelled like markers. You're the best, Dad, she wrote, drawing a crooked trophy. I taped them in my toolbox where only I would see them. Laura said, don't make her feel guilty about money, okay? I nodded because kids should carry backpacks, not ledgers. Our marriage cracked in quiet stages, like hairline fractures in tile. Laura wanted sharper rooms and softer days. I wanted honest timelines. Counseling helped us talk better, not want the same things. We divorced without a courtroom brawl or broken plates. She kept the lake house. I kept the business and my tools. Don't short Emily's chances, Laura said at mediation, voice neat. I won't, I answered, because I meant it that day. We split holidays, school events, and the uneasy pride of 2 homes. Emily learned to read the space between grown-up sentences. College arrived like a freight train painted in school colors. Tuition looked like a contractor's nightmare stacked on polished brochures. Emily picked a private university with a lab she loved. It'll pay off, she said, eyes bright and unquestioned. I told her we'd cover it as a team with loans. I sold a lot I liked and 1 truck I loved. You don't have to, she said softly, touching the old steering wheel. I want to, I answered, which was true and also heavy. Laura promised to help, and sometimes the numbers showed she did. During junior year, Emily dated a senior who wore confidence like cologne. He was all promises and smooth plans without clear nails. He's ambitious, she said, and I heard a test in her tone. Ambition is good when it delivers, I said, keeping it gentle. That one drifted after graduation, leaving a neat dent in her trust. She called me and cried for 20 minutes without asking for solutions. I told her, "You are not someone's stepping stone or side door." She laughed through tears and said I sounded like a coach. Maybe I did, because building and parenting share the same math. Enter Ryan 2 years later, polished shoes and a loud handshake. He sold software dreams and read the room like a mirror. "Your daughter is brilliant," he told me, eyes never leaving my face. "She makes me better," he added, which I wanted to believe. Laura adored him because he looked like a magazine spread. "He's going places," she said, as if life were a map store. Emily told me he was intense and warm and always on. I said, "On is good when the switch also goes off." She rolled her eyes and said I overthink simple happiness. Their engagement came fast, followed by save the dates with gilded edges. Emily asked for a small wedding. Laura asked for a bigger story. "It's one day," Laura said, smoothing napkin samples into a river. I said yes because I wanted the day to be smooth. I made one rule. Contracts run through my business for accountability. Emily shrugged. Ryan smiled and said, "Whatever makes you comfortable." He said comfortable like a child trying on someone else's jacket. The budget grew like ivy on a wall no one trims. I trimmed my life instead and kept my answers calm. Yesterday's sentence landed because it pulled on every old thread. "We don't owe you anything," sounded like a summary of years. Not the love, not the late night rides, not the sold truck. The words were free to say, but the cost wasn't imaginary. I wasn't hunting revenge. Revenge wastes time and leaves messy edges. I wanted a clean correction that matched their public choice. No strings, no control, no ownership claims they didn't respect. That meant I would stop pretending money was background weather. Weather moves on. Ownership stays until the contract says otherwise. At 7, I called Daniel, and he picked up on the second ring. "Morning," he said. "You sound like a man building a new staircase." "I am," I answered. "I need to confirm 3 boundaries. Quick." He asked for the shape, not the whole blueprints. "All contracts are corporate. Termination rights are clear. No safety risks," I said. "No slander, no scene, no public drama. Only lawful repossession." He considered and asked one careful question about optics. "Protect privacy," I said. "This is a reset, not a parade." He said he'd meet me at 9, with tidy language if needed. I texted Emily a simple note before the day got busy. "Proud of you. We'll talk this afternoon. Rest up, kiddo." She replied a heart and nothing else, which told me enough. She was navigating pressure, emotion, and a husband who likes spotlights. I would not add weight to her back in public daylight. I would move my weight back to where it belonged. That is not punishment. That is gravity doing its job. Houses stand when loads sit on the right beams. Today, I would move the beams back to their proper place. I met Daniel at his office, a modest space near the courthouse. He wore a gray suit that looked like a rule book with buttons. We shook hands and skipped small talk because time likes focus. "Scope?" he asked, opening a legal pad already lined. "Lawful control and quiet optics," I said, keeping my cadence even. He nodded like a carpenter checking level, then asked for contracts. I placed a folder down with tabs he could drive blind. "Corporate client, termination rights, and repossession on misuse," he read. "This is clean. The question is timing, not legality." He kept the analysis short because he knows I dislike jargon. "You can end open-ended services with notice and safety checks," he said. "You can reclaim rentals you own or that are unpaid." He tapped a page and smiled a little at the drafting. "You also preserve discretion clauses to prevent publicity." I asked for a simple checklist in plain English, not Latin. He wrote 10 lines like a grocery list with teeth. "Notify planner, notify venue, notify vendors, coordinate storage, control hotel," he said. "No public speeches, no confrontations, no written insults." I signed one instruction letter and left. Outside, the morning felt like a sight at first power on. I called Karen from the sidewalk and stood in a square of sun. "We will wind down Turner-controlled services today," I said. "Everything lawful and quiet." She repeated "quiet" back to me because that was the load-bearing word. I asked her to coordinate pickup windows with staff safety first. She confirmed the venue's release hours and the loading dock schedule. "No vendor gets stiffed," I added, and she promised precise accounting. We agreed on a noon start and a staggered exit plan. Control lives in sequence, not volume. I called Luis and kept the message to logistics and respect. "Bring the small crew in the covered truck by noon," I said. "We'll retrieve rentals and lighting fixtures per the checklist." He asked if tempers were likely to flare at the site. "We are not a story," I answered, setting the tone hard. We are a moving company with paperwork. He laughed once and said he would brief the guys clearly. Steel-toe boots, gloves, and quiet, he added, saving me words. I felt better because execution lives in crews that listen. Good people are the best insurance a plan can buy. Next, I drove to the bank because numbers obey signatures. My rep, Melissa, greeted me with the calm of someone who balances storms. We reviewed the event card authorizations and vendor settlement steps. Close flex authorizations at 2, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She confirmed the time and noted the exception for gratuities owed. I canceled the honeymoon upgrade I had reserved but not delivered. That was a promise, not a product, and promises can end. I also paused the down payment transfer I had queued for Monday. Delivery never happened, so pause meant lawful and clean. I stopped by the hotel to review the block with the manager. We stood behind the desk like two pilots reading a checklist. Reduce open bar vouchers at 3, per your policy, I said. Keep security soft and invisible unless you need weight. He confirmed he would position staff near the elevators without uniforms. Any guest asks about changes, refer them to Turner account, he said. I approved because a single point of contact prevents fires. If Emily asks, call me first, I added carefully. He wrote it down like a promise he planned to keep. Privacy is protection, not distance. At the venue, Karen had the dock clear and the paperwork ready. The lighting team lowered trusses with the care of surgeons. My crew wrapped pedestals and boxed custom signage I had commissioned. I checked every tag twice and signed each release with measured strokes. Ryan's cousin wandered near the dock and tried to peek. Karen redirected him with a smile so smooth it felt invisible. Is this normal? He asked casually, hands in pockets like mischief. Normal after events, she answered, polite and vague. People accept vague when uniforms look busy. By mid-afternoon, I called Emily because she deserved direct words. Hey kiddo, I said softly, keeping my tone steady and warm. I'm wrapping up vendor settlements and returning company rentals today. She was quiet for a breath and then exhaled into the phone. Is this because of last night? She asked, already knowing. It's because ownership belongs where responsibility lives, I said. No scenes, no mess, just clean lines. She said Ryan believed I was punishing them for independence. I'm honoring independence, I answered, not raising my voice a notch. Independence means paying for your own life. I didn't call Ryan because he prefers audiences to conversations. Daniel texted to remind me about tone and written records. I replied with a photo of signed receipts and vendor acknowledgments. He wrote back, perfect. This is measured, not vindictive. I stood in the empty ballroom and listened to the soft hum. Carpets hold echoes when music leaves, and so do memories. I thanked the crew individually and handed out envelope bonuses. Respect pays dividends tomorrow that money alone cannot buy. We shut the dock door, and the latch clicked like a period. Afterward, I parked near the river and watched small boats drift. I thought about how pride can look like freedom from the shore. Up close, freedom is maintenance, fuel, and a map you study. Emily would understand that lesson slower because love complicates math. I would hold my side of the line without anger or theater. Boundaries are boring until they save the whole structure. Tonight, there would be complaints, maybe loud ones and fast texts. I would answer only the ones that asked in good faith. The rest could talk to the wind and feel important. I built the wedding like a project with numbered switches. Contracts anchored everything, dressed in polite language and measurable duties. Each vendor answered to Turner, Build, and Supply, not to me. That kept emotions separate from enforcement and payments predictably clean. Deposits flowed through a dedicated account with reconciled ledgers and alerts. If a vendor drifted, clauses let me pause without shouting. If a guest misbehaved, safety riders let security intervene quietly. I wasn't playing tyrant. I was protecting people I hired. Good control feels boring because boredom means nothing is breaking. That's how I like celebrations, steady enough to fade into memory. The venue agreement looked firm, like a handshake wearing armor. I negotiated a client control clause tied to safety and decorum. That meant I could end usage if disorder threatened property. We added a quiet hours addendum forbidding amplified mics after 11. It read boring, which is exactly how control should read. Rentals belonged to my company, with serial numbers matching box labels. Lighting trusses were insured under my commercial policy, not the venue's. The band's contract included a no derogatory speechwriter and clean exit windows. Shuttle schedules were fixed to my dispatch code, not guest demands. Even the linens carried tags returning custody to Turner inventory. I threaded the housing question into plan before the invitations shipped. Emily and Ryan had toured a duplex with bright windows and possibility. Ryan hinted I should co-sign, then pushed for partial title immediately. I smiled, listened, and chose something stronger than shared ownership gestures. I bought a small bungalow through the company and leased it. The lease set rent at $1 until their first anniversary passed. After that date, fair market rent would apply unless responsibilities changed. Utilities remained theirs, because adulthood begins where automatic payments live. I kept maintenance responsibility, because roofs are my language and promise. That structure felt generous without pretending generosity equals surrender. Laura wanted me to gift them a honeymoon and a car. She said it would show support and keep the family image polished. I wrote purchase options instead, with timelines and completion standards attached. The honeymoon existed as a reservation requiring a final authorization code, missed the code window, and the reservation died without drama. The car lived on my lot with insurance and temporary tags. They could assume payments and title after 6 consecutive months employed. Employment meant pay stubs, not speeches about potential and personal brand. I wasn't humiliating them. I was insisting on verifiable adulthood. That difference matters when bills and pride collide at month's end. Karen helped me encode practical acts into checklists that felt invisible. She kept vendor contacts grouped, payment triggers marked, and buffers generous. Her headset style is grace, hiding the sternness of a foreman. She understood that a clean plan is the kindest plan available. A plan holds people when feelings start bumping into furniture. She suggested backup generators and a second refrigeration unit for desserts. I approved both because failure loves attention and hates redundancy quietly. We recruited additional ushers trained to de-escalate without becoming part of scenes. Karen ran rehearsal like a runway crew, hand signaling quiet, swift landings. I trusted her because she respected sequence and never romanticized logistics. Daniel audited my documents and spoke in sentences tired people understand. He cut the Latin and replaced it with verbs people actually use. You can pause, reclaim, or conclude, he said, tapping 3 boxes. Pause for behavior, reclaim for misuse, conclude for completion or change. He warned me to resist any letter that sounded like anger. Let the paper be furniture, he said. Strong, quiet, useful. We also drafted a letter stating gifts would be conditional. Gifts convert to loans if used to control, harm, or embarrass. That clause was a guardrail, not a trap with hidden teeth. It allowed grace without letting grace become a doormat forever. The morning after, I didn't flip every switch at once. I moved sequence by sequence, matching paperwork to facts without drama. The venue kept their deposit and released the rest per schedule. Lighting came down with thank yous and overtime envelopes for careful hands. The band packed neatly, signatures recorded, and no slurs reported. Shuttle vouchers shrank at 3 because burdens needed to shift shoulders. The hotel adjusted perks, leaving rooms but dropping luxury fluff pieces. The car stayed on my lot, ignition keys sealed in the safe. The bungalow lease remained active at $1, as promised. I wasn't punishing anybody. I was returning custody to the custodian. Ryan called around dinner using a tone he saves for closings. We heard vendors were pulled, he said, treating rumor like evidence. Perks vanished and vouchers tightened, he added, voice chasing control. I listened until the pitch asked for a predictable objection. We are independent, he insisted, confident like a rehearsed commercial. Then independence pays its own freight, I answered without any heat. Emily called later, softer, asking whether this was permanent or negotiable. It depends on responsibility landing where it belongs, I told her. Prove employment and respect the contracts, and options reopen in sequence. The morning of the take-back felt like job site inspection weather. Cool air, no wind, and everything ready to move. I parked behind the venue again, not as a father but as the client of record. My name sat at the top of every document, and that's all that mattered. Karen was waiting, clipboard steady, headset already lit. Everything's lined up, Mr. Turner, she said. Vendors are ready to release remaining items. I thanked her and asked if security was briefed. Yes. No confrontation, no press, just retrieval. That was all I needed to hear. Luis arrived with 2 trucks and 4 men in Turner-build uniforms. They moved quiet, the way trained crews do when words waste time. Same plan? He asked. Same plan, I said. No commentary, no delays. They split into teams, one for furniture and rentals, one for fixtures. Every crate, stand, and custom piece wore a barcode I'd logged myself. Ownership isn't pride. It's paperwork with consequences. Inside, staff moved like polite ghosts, wrapping linens, labeling lights. Karen handed me the sign-off sheet, eyes flicking once toward the ballroom doors. "They're upstairs," she whispered. I nodded but didn't look. This wasn't revenge, it was arithmetic. You remove what belongs to you, and the sum balances again. Still, I felt the air thicken when I heard the muffled hum of conversation above. A wedding brunch was in progress, a small encore organized by Laura. Of course, Laura found me first. She descended the stairs like the lead in a scene she didn't write. "Michael, what are you doing?" she asked, voice low but sharp. "Finishing my part," I said evenly. "Contract closeout." She glanced at the trucks visible through the side doors. "You're taking things?" she asked. "Company assets," I said. "Paid, insured, and logged." She looked for emotion in my face and found none she could use. "This is beneath you," she tried. "No," I said. "This is exactly where I stand." Ryan appeared a moment later, shirt untucked, tie missing. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "Our decorator's losing half the setup." I kept my posture steady and my tone professional. "The decorator worked for Turner Build. That contract ended yesterday." He stepped closer, trying to fill space with height. "You can't just take stuff, man. That's theft." I met his stare, the way I'd face a subcontractor trying to bluff change orders. "Read the signatures," I said. "You're standing in my rental inventory." He looked around and saw the Turner Build logos he'd never noticed. "You're serious," he said, softer now. "Completely," I answered. Emily entered halfway through, still in her morning dress, eyes tired. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Can we talk before this goes any further?" I nodded toward a side hallway where the noise couldn't follow. She walked beside me, slow and stiff like someone rehearsing lines. "He said you're embarrassing us," she began. "This is business, not performance," I said. "I'm concluding agreements that bear my name." She blinked back tears that looked more confused than angry. "You're proving his point," she said quietly. "No," I said. "He proved mine. Independence means ownership. Ownership means responsibility. I'm just showing you the math." I handed her a folder, slim and tidy. "These are copies of every contract and payment receipt," I said. "You'll see I never mix gifts with obligations." She took it, unsure whether to hold or drop it. "What happens now?" she asked, voice breaking a little. "Now you start from zero," I said gently. "You wanted clean, you have clean. Nothing owed, nothing controlled." She nodded slowly, like she heard the logic even if she hated the tone. "You could have just told us," she said. "I did," I answered. "You didn't want to listen until the sound matched the lesson." Back in the ballroom, the crew worked with quiet rhythm. Chairs stacked, floral pedestals boxed, uplights unplugged. Ryan tried one more swing at bravado. "You're making yourself look petty," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but I'm making myself whole." He laughed once, the short, brittle kind people use when walls shift. "You'll regret this," he said. "Maybe not," I answered. "I've built too many roofs to forget gravity." Karen handed me the final signed inventory sheet. "All clear," she said. "Everything accounted for." "Good," I said. "Close it out." As we loaded the last truck, I looked at the building's front windows. The decorations were gone, leaving only clean glass and pale light. Guests peeked through curtains upstairs, their curiosity running faster than sense. I didn't wave. This wasn't a performance for them either. I signed the transport log and told Luis to return everything to the warehouse. "Nice and easy," he said. "Always," I replied. The trucks rolled out one by one, diesel hummed steady, like exhaling control. Before I left, Emily came down once more. "You really took everything," she said softly. "Everything I paid for," I said. "Everything you disowned last night." She closed her eyes, nodded, and whispered, "He was wrong to say it." "Then don't repeat it," I said, keeping my voice low. "You can rebuild anything you respect." She hugged me quick, a reflex from a better time. "I'll call you when I can think straight," she said. "Take your time," I answered, and meant it. When I stepped outside, the trucks were turning onto the road. The sunlight caught the company logo, bright against steel. I felt no triumph, just a quiet correction settling into place. Ownership back where it belonged. Pride back where it could breathe. Karen locked the dock gate and said, "You really did take back everything." "Not everything," I said. "Just what was mine." The calls started before I reached the warehouse gate. Laura's number flashed, then Ryan's, then cousins who never cared about me before. I let them roll to voicemail because emergencies sound different than blame. Emily texted one line that mattered. "I'm okay." I answered with the same weight. "Good. Call when you're ready." Daniel sent a thumbs up and a reminder to archive messages. Karen reported that the dock closed clean and staff clocked out safe. Lewis texted a photo of stacked crates like a quiet salute. Noise traveled fast that afternoon, but so did facts that wore signatures. I kept my hands busy and my mouth closed. By evening, Instagram rehearsed the new version of last night. Guests posted pictures cropped to hide half-empty spaces. Someone wrote a vague caption about money drama and controlling parents. Ryan posted a selfie with Emily, writing, "Love isn't for sale, folks." He added a wink emoji, then tagged a whiskey brand he wants to sponsor. I did not answer, because dignity hates comment sections. Karen emailed me time-stamped photos and exit logs, just in case anything spun. Daniel called and said, "Stay still. Paper speaks better than people tonight." I agreed and sent one private note to family. Company concluded contracts per terms. At the hotel, vouchers thinned when the clock hit policy. Ryan's friends found the manager and tried to argue with volume. The manager explained the account holder's limits and pointed to his screen. A friend called me cheap and offered to take this outside. The manager raised a hand and said security would handle any outside. Emily stepped between them and said, "Go upstairs or go home." The group scattered, annoyed without a plan, and looked smaller in the lobby. Ryan asked about the honeymoon upgrade and learned it never finalized. He glared at the ceiling as if blame lived in ductwork. Emily touched his arm. He pulled away like touch cost money. Monday arrived with the smell of coffee and wet concrete. The travel agency sent a calm email noting an expired authorization window. The dealership confirmed the car remained titled to Turner Build, insured, and parked. My bookkeeper processed vendor tips and closed the event ledger for audit. Electricity for the bungalow posted to their online portal, still unpaid. Emily texted, asking if the lease remained at $1 this month. "Yes," I wrote. "Utilities are yours. Call me if you're struggling." Ryan finally called and asked for a short bridge loan to cover early marriage turbulence. I said loans require terms and collateral. He said pride was his collateral. Pride is air. Banks prefer wood and metal. Laura arrived at my office without an appointment and sat without asking. "You humiliated us," she began, voice wrapped in silk and smoke. I poured water and set it near her hand without a word. "You could have waited," she said, "handled this in private." I reminded her the statement was public. My answer matched the venue. "I protected staff, property, and myself," I added. "You protected your ego," she said, pressing the old bruise. "I protected boundaries we agreed to on paper," I said, not raising heat. She stared at the table, then admitted Ryan's words were reckless. "Reconsider the car," she asked softly. "Reconsider respect," I answered. That afternoon, Ryan sent a 2-paragraph email titled, "Demand to return property." He called the retrieval theft and threatened full legal consequences. Daniel replied with a polite packet that included contracts, receipts, and release forms. He quoted the termination clauses and the no defamation rider line by line. He invited Ryan to propose mutual non-disparagement within 48 hours. He also suggested they avoid publishing false claims that create damages. Ryan's father called next, voice heavy with business school caution. "Let's be reasonable," he said. "We are," I answered. "We're finished with unreasonable." He promised to speak to his son and hung up before pride leaked. The vendors reached out privately with small notes that mattered. The florist thanked me for paying early and tipping the cleanup crew. The band leader wrote that he'd never felt safer at a tense event. Karen sent a final invoice marked, paid with a simple, "Take care, Michael." On job sites, your reputation is your brake and your gas. Word of clean exits travels, and phones ring when people trust outcomes. My crew returned to normal schedules and left the wedding in the rear view. I kept my eyes forward, because backwards has no steering wheel. The story shrank to the size of the people still telling it. Emily texted midweek and asked to meet without Ryan. We chose a park by the river because it was neutral and quiet. She looked tired, like sleep had edges that cut. "I hate that it came to this," she said, voice steady. "I wanted simple, and I made it messy." I told her simple survives only when people carry their weight. She nodded, then asked about the bungalow and whether the lease would hold. "It holds for a year," I said. "After that, market rent or a change." She swallowed and said, "He's angry and it keeps bouncing back on me." I listened and kept the air safe around her words. She explained debt, sales quotas, and a personal brand that ate weekends. She said Ryan expected applause for volume and speed, not for results. "He's talented," she added, "but he performs even when no one's watching." Her voice cracked, then found a clean line again. I married the performance and forgot the practice required. She asked if I would restore the honeymoon if they proved stability. Stability means 6 months of proof. Employment, rent, respect. I said, No public digs, no games with gratitude, no more theater. She nodded and wiped her face with the inside of her wrist. I can do my part, she said, leaving the rest unnamed. That night, Ryan posted a long story about toxic expectations. He hinted about older generations buying control and calling it love. Comments split between cheerleaders and people who like bonfires. In the morning, the story vanished after someone advised him to think. Daniel called to say a mutual non-disparagement letter arrived, clumsy but workable. We tightened language, removed the martyr pose, and sent back clean text. Emily texted that they would sign if I restored the car option. I replied, sign first, show pay stubs, then we talk timelines. She answered, okay, and for once it meant the word and nothing else. By week's end, silence replaced the fireworks, which is how grown-ups win. Laura sent an apology without adjectives. I answered with a single, thank you. The hotel closed the block without incident. The manager thanked us for clarity. The bungalow felt steady on paper, which meant Emily had a place to breathe. I stood in my warehouse and looked at the stacked pedestals. They were just wood and fabric again, not symbols or leverage. I ran my hands along a crate and felt the grain settle. The fallout wasn't flames, it was dust that finally had room to land. The next part would belong to choices, not statements. Consequence arrived slower than rumors, but heavier than any caption online. Bills don't blink, and that's where stories meet numbers. The bungalow's utility accounts ticked forward, steady as a metronome. Emily texted meter photos and asked about due dates and grace periods. Standard timelines, I said, keeping the words simple and neutral. She asked if I could set reminders. I told her she should. Adults build their own timers because responsibility uses private clocks. She didn't argue or fold into silence. She wrote, understood. That word meant more to me than any post or apology. It meant she was standing on the ground, not on a stage. Ryan called that evening with a voice tuned for negotiation. We signed the non-disparagement, he said, waiting for praise. I said thank you and asked about steady work and posted quotas. He said the market was slow, then blamed management for mixed signals. They moved target accounts, so my pipeline got messy, he complained. I asked for pay stubs because plans need proof, not monologues. He bristled and said he wasn't applying for a loan here. Then don't ask for assets, I replied, keeping my tone level. He exhaled hard and finally asked how to reset properly. Respect, proof, and quiet, I said. Start there and see what holds. 2 days later, Emily called from the porch steps at dusk. I could hear traffic and a neighbor's dog working the fence line. I asked him to meet me halfway, she began, voice careful. He apologized, but it felt like he apologized to the air. She told me she asked for counseling through their church office. Ryan said he was busy, then asked for a cool-off period. Cool-off periods don't pay the internet bill, she said, almost laughing. I asked if she felt safe. She said yes without hesitation. I'm disappointed, not endangered, she added, drawing the right line. Then anchor yourself, I said. Anchors look boring, but boats love them. At work, consequence felt like clean floors and phones that still rang. Luis briefed the team on the wedding retrieval as a safety drill. We protect people, property, and our name, he said to the room. No one joked because that sentence belongs to serious crews. A developer I trust called to ask if we handle event builds. He heard about our quiet exit and liked the word quiet most. Most folks start yelling when plans bend, he said, sounding tired. Your team packed up like a library. I told him we don't worship drama. We obey sequence. He gave us a museum lobby contract by lunch. Consequence paid in currency I actually respect. Laura invited me to coffee in a strip mall I built years back. She arrived with fewer angles and more pauses between thoughts. I underestimated how public words can damage private bonds, she said. I nodded and let the sentence rest without adding nails. I wanted a perfect picture for our friends, she admitted, eyes lowered. Pictures don't carry weight, I said. Beams do. You taught Emily pictures. She didn't flinch or blame. She asked what she could fix now. Stop translating his pride into our language, I said quietly. Let him own his edges. She agreed, then finally thanked me for protecting staff. That thank you felt late, but it landed sound. The dealership called to confirm the car's storage plan and maintenance cycle. I kept it serviced because neglect becomes its own kind of loss. We can release within 24 hours if terms change, the manager said. I told him release requires pay stubs and a 6-month record. He repeated the requirement and promised no shortcuts through charm or pressure. He knew Ryan's type because sales floors meet them daily. Confidence is a tool, he said, but tools misuse break too. I liked that sentence because it sounded like a shop rule. I updated Daniel with notes that would age well on paper. Paper ages better than tempers. That's why we use it. Emily visited on Saturday with a cardboard box and a question. She placed photo frames on my bench and looked at the floor. He wants to move downtown and chase bigger accounts, she said. He says the neighborhood inspires winners and closes. I asked what she wanted, without hinting an answer with my face. I want rest and a plan that doesn't need an audience, she said. I told her those things grow in small rooms with clear chores. She smiled weakly and asked if the high $1 lease still stood. It stands, I said. It's a bridge, not a lifestyle. She breathed out and said a bridge sounded perfect for now. Sunday brought an email from Ryan that finally sounded human. He wrote that he embarrassed me and wounded Emily with one sentence. He didn't excuse tone, alcohol, or friends. He owned the room. He asked for a meeting with parameters and a 15-minute hard stop. I respected the structure and offered a slot at my office. At the meeting, he sat upright and spoke without a smile. I was proud of paying my way, he said, voice honest. Then I realized I wasn't actually paying. I asked what paying meant in numbers, not slogans. He answered with dates, quotas, and a budget line for counseling. That was the first plan I could actually see. We set 3 milestones and a quiet period without posts or hints. 6 months of pay stubs, on-time utilities, and counseling attendance verified. Non-disparagement remained, with consequences spelled out like building codes. I promised to revisit the car option if those lines held steady. Emily agreed and asked for time charts taped inside the pantry door. I am calmer when the calendar tells me the truth, she said. That sentence pleased me more than any gift ever would. Truth loves walls with hooks, labels, and pens that don't disappear. We ended the meeting with a handshake that felt like lumber cured right. The consequence wasn't punishment, it was framing that could finally hold weight. 6 months moved like a careful tide, inches at a time. Nothing crashed, and that steadiness felt right again. Emily kept the bungalow neat, with bills pinned to a corkboard. She sent photos of paid receipts like mile markers on a road. Ryan attended counseling Thursdays at 4 and emailed confirmations afterward. He stopped posting speeches and started sending proof with plain subjects. The house felt quieter, like drywall after sanding. I breathed easier, not because I won, but because order held without applause. We met monthly at my office with coffee and silence first. Then we reviewed milestones, paper stacked like sturdy bricks. Emily tracked utilities on a yellow pad and totaled them cleanly. Ryan read income lines without decorating them with slogans. He studied the numbers the way builders study level bubbles. When a payment slipped by 3 days, Emily called before I asked. It won't happen again, she said, and the next line proved it. The lesson lived on the page, not in a speech. At month 2, the car returned to the conversation without sparks. Not a prize, I said. A transfer with duties and costs. Ryan nodded and listed insurance, maintenance, fuel, and registration. I called the dealership and confirmed release steps without fanfare. We signed the transfer and he shook my hand without performance. Thank you, he said, not to the room, but directly to me. Gratitude sounded different when it wasn't seeking an audience. The odometer began counting miles they actually earned. They asked about the honeymoon, and I paused to think. Honeymoons aren't escapes, I said. They're rests between seasons of work. Emily smiled because simple language sits best in tired rooms. I reinstated the reservation with a letter about expectations and respect. They booked a small cabin instead of chasing airports and hashtags. Pictures later showed boots muddy and faces warm in Oregon rain. No captions about control. Just private joy shared only with family. That privacy felt like repair done right, strong, hidden, and useful. By month 4, Ryan's supervisor called me unprompted for a reference. He credits you for the turnaround, the man said, surprised. I said credit belonged to the person who chose practice over posture. Practice revised Ryan's tone and softened his elbows with customers. Emily earned a promotion and negotiated salary without apology. Counseling taught her to hold lines without raising volume. She told me she felt tired, but the tired felt honest now. Honest tired builds futures. Theatrical tired builds crowds. One evening, Emily invited me for dinner at the bungalow. The porch light worked, the steps were swept, and the sink was clear. She made chili from a card her grandmother wrote years back. Ryan set the table without narrating the task like an achievement. After dishes, Ryan asked for 5 minutes in the garage. He handed me a printed letter with numbers and no emojis. I read quietly and handed the paper back to his hands. You did the work, I said, and that was enough. He didn't push for a speech or a seal of approval. I'm learning to build without clapping for myself, he said. Emily joined us, leaning against the door frame, listening more than speaking. We'd like to keep the lease until the year ends, she said. Then we'll move or pay market rent, whichever fits our plan. I agreed because plans deserve time before they face weather. Month 5 brought a curve I didn't script, and it proved the frame. Ryan missed quota narrowly and lost a bonus he had counted. Old Ryan would have hunted a spotlight and blamed targets and luck. This Ryan called Emily first, then called me to own the shortfall. I'll cover it by trimming extras and picking up weekend work, he said. He did, and their budget held without borrowing against pride. I saved it because proof ages better than promises ever will. They were building, not broadcasting. On the last day of 6 months, we met at my office. We met the milestones, Emily said, tapping each box once. Ryan nodded, and for once his eyes didn't search for a camera. We'd like to discuss next steps, he said, polite and precise. I offered 3. Extend the lease at market, buy modest, or move. No balloons, I added, smiling because lightness finally fit. Just numbers and calendars. They chose to save 6 more months and decide with facts. I released the last restriction letter and filed the rest away carefully, not as a threat, but as history we could respect without reliving. Emily hugged me, not quick or desperate, just certain and steady. Ryan shook my hand the way men do when they understand stakes. Their rhythm matched, like a crew leaving a finished site at dusk. I locked the office and felt dignity settle where anger used to sit. Respect isn't a gift, it's framing that holds when weather shifts. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like the video and tell me what you think in the comments. And of course, subscribe for more stories like this one.